lead us in the pledge. We'd all stand and face the flag.
Would everyone please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Matthew, if you'll introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Matt Martrat. I'm from Marietta. I'm from Troop 008 out of Wesley Chapel Church. I'm a rising junior at Lassiter High School, and I'm completing my last requirement for Eagle Scout tonight.
Well, congratulations. Councilmember Orleans and Councilmember DiPolito made it to life. They made it to where you are right now, and with the urging of my father, I became an Eagle, so look forward to you joining the ranks of Eagle.
Thank you.
Welcome to Roswell.
Thank you.
Let's have a hand for Matthew. All right. We have a proclamation for the 15th anniversary of the Recycling Center. And Councilman Orleans was there when this, well, I was there when it happened too, but I didn't really get it started like Councilman Orleans did. He was the one who really kicked it off. When we finished it, I wasn't there when we started it. So it is my pleasure to read this proclamation regarding our 15th anniversary celebration. Whereas in the late 1980s, a group of Roswell citizens banded together to organize a local recycling effort. With nothing but a few trailers and the dedication of a group of volunteers, the Roswell Recycling Center was built. In the early 1990s, staff was hired to run the facility and to assist our citizens. And whereas in 1998, the City of Roswell received a grant from the Georgia Environmental Facilities Authority to build a new recycling center, which was completed in June of 2000. And whereas the new building consisted of equipment and amenities that expanded operations and allowed for more efficiencies. And whereas the Roswell Recycling Center now operates with a staff of 7 people and has collected over 46,800 tons of material for recycling. And whereas Roswell residents can recycle over 40 items, including latex paint, tires, electronics, appliances, and vegetable oil for free. And whereas the Roswell Recycling Center is celebrating 15 years in their current location, with a grand reopening to include a ribbon cutting on June 5th, public tours on the 5th, 11th, 16th, and 26th, story time on June 2nd, 10th, and 18th, as well as giveaways and other fun activities for the whole family. Now, therefore, I, Jerry Wood, Mayor of the City of Roswell, do hereby proclaim the month of June as the Roswell Recycling Center month and invite all of our citizens to recycle and to visit our recycling center and join in this celebration. So let's hear from the recycling folks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. It's my pleasure to be here and to introduce Janet Lieberman, who was here during the construction of the facility, and Trevor Williams, who is our current facility manager, as well as Roger Recycling. And we have many events planned. Janet, did you want to make any comments about the week?
Well, it's going to be a great week. The storytelling is different for us, but we wanted to do something that would involve the kids. So Trevor has books about recycling and other environmental issues, and the kids can come in and have story time and do a craft. And we thought that was a little different spin. And we also wanted to open it up for tours. Summer seems a good time to do that. And, of course, the ribbon cutting, and we hope that you all will be there. I just feel, I say this all the time and some people roll their eyes, but I feel really fortunate to work in the City of Roswell because really our residents started this recycling center. They said we needed it, and Mayor and Council at the time, some of you may have, Jerry Orleans I know was there, you may be the only one, picked up on that and took it over, and then we got the grant, and it is what it is today, and it's come a long way, but it all started with the citizens, and that's just really cool to work in a city where citizens actually come forward and make the changes. So I hope you'll all come out on the 5th, and story time and tours and all of that.
Councilman Orleans, anything to add to that? You're being our historian, our history.
No, I think it. I think it's great. We got the grant to build this structure, this new structure, and worked out well. And it's one of the best recycling locations, I think, in the country. I mean, they do everything there. It's great. It's worked out well for the city of Roswell, and it's been the envy of everybody that loves recycling.
Really is a great amenity for the city of Roswell. Let's have a hand for Roswell Recycling, and let's turn out for that. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Councilmember Wynn, second by Councilmember Orleans. Does anyone in the audience have any questions regarding the consent agenda? Yes, come forward, please.
What is item number 2?
There was a request. Apparently, there is you can, without changing the zip code, you can change the address of the city. Parts of Roswell have a Alpharetta address and a Johns Creek address, which is confusing. And so this is a request to allow the people that live in the city of Roswell, but to have an Alpharetta or Johns Creek zip code to use the Roswell address. And so it will be a request.
So do they keep their Roswell? I mean, I just think this is strange. They live in Johns Creek or they live in Roswell?
They live in the city of Roswell.
But they have a
and
Johns
the post
Creek?
office, but they are served by the Alpharetta or the Johns Creek post office. And they have a zip code. The zip code doesn't follow city lines. It was there before the city lines were created. And it's simply trying to bring their address in line with their city of residence to eliminate confusion.
It's kind of like the people that live in East Cobb but have a Roswell zip code, and I tell them they live in VFW, very far west Roswell.
Kind of like that.
Okay, that was just the strangest thing to me. And thanks about the recycling center. I know it's off topic here, but yeah, it's great. I think we ought to mention and read into the record that Kathy Schechter was the person and volunteer that started it back in the 80s. She's never been mentioned. She was a Roswell citizen here, and I helped her start that. We used to throw junk into trailers, but her name was Kathy Schechter, and she lived right off of House Road.
Well, thank you, Kathy Schechter. All in favor of the consent agenda, raise their hands. Passes unanimously, which brings us to the second reading of the budget.
Thank you. This is an ordinance adopting a budget for fiscal year 2016 for each fund of the City of Roswell, Georgia, pursuant to Article 6, Chapter 6 of the Charter of the City, beginning July 1st, 2015, and ending June 30th, 2016, appropriating the amounts shown in each budget as expenditures, adopting the item of anticipated funding sources, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures from exceeding actual funding sources, and amending the Code of Ordinances to effectuate such adoption. Now, therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following ordinance. The City of Roswell, Georgia hereby adopts an expenditure budget for fiscal year 2016, said budget being described below and shown on Schedule A for each fund of the City of Roswell, Georgia. General Fund, $68,355,599. Confiscated Assets Fund, $225,304. E911 Fund, $2,094,161. Impact Fee Fund, $2,586,600. Cemetery Fund, $23,500. Hotel Motel Fund, $1,083,113. Lita Thompson Rental Fund, $97,692. Capital Projects Fund, $11,022,669. Debt Service Fund, $1,763,688. Water Sewer Fund, $3,406,415. Stormwater Fund, $3,765,917. Solid Waste Fund, $9,806,701. Recreation Participation Fund, $5,025,838. Workers' Compensation Fund, $564,496. Group Benefit Fund, $7,250,256. Risk and Liability Fund, $1,175,625. Fleet Services Fund, $718,715. Grants Fund, $415,187. for a grand total of $119,381,476. Millage rate of 5.455 mils is hereby established as part of the proposed budget based on the estimated digest of Fulton County. The millage rate has a component of 5.055 mils for the general fund, operating and capital improvements budget, and a component of .400 mils for servicing bonded indebtedness. The millage rate may require adjustment upon approval of a certified tax digest for the tax year 2015. This budget fixes the number of budgeted full-time positions of the city at 604. The mayor and council adopt a capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2016 through 2020 as attached hereto and incorporated herein as Schedule B. This plan does not indicate any promise of appropriations for future years. Mayor and council further approve the reappropriation of all approved capital project, grant revenue, grant funding, and contingency funding that is unspent or uncollected and available as of June 30th, 2015, along with the reprogramming of $213,083 identified from the current capital projects as attached hereto as Schedule C. Mayor and council further approve reappropriation of all unspent 2015 firefighter fees to continue to fund firefighter staffing at 28 personnel in fiscal year 2016. Mayor and council further approve reappropriation of $36,870 of unspent Roswell Arts Commission funding and $75,000 of unspent Roswell Downtown Development Authority funding in fiscal year 2016. And the city administrator or his or her designee may promulgate all necessary internal rules, regulations, and policies to ensure that this budget ordinance is followed. They have approved this to be the second reading.
I understand we have a short presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This will be a short presentation for the second reading of the budget. Just one more time to go through our budget principles upon which the budget has been established. We start with the projected revenues, and we balance in the operating expenditures and the maintenance capital. The reserves are only used for one-time capital. The budget is established to maintain a reserve of 3 months of operating expenditures. The FY 2016 proposed amount of that is $14.6 million in general fund in that reserve. The budget does not have any increase in the combined property tax rate, and it maintains the current level of services. The general fund revenues as proposed are $65.3 million. The two largest categories, sales tax and property tax, together make up $45.3 million, or 69% of the fiscal year 2016 proposed general fund revenues. On the general fund expenditure side, the proposed amount is $68.6 million. The largest departments shares are police department at $17.3 million, recreation and parks at $11.3 million, transportation at $11 million, and administration at $9.2 million. So the general fund summary, the revenues and expenditures are balanced at $68,592,469. It does include a proposed use of general fund balance, the amount of $3 million for one-time capital projects as following our budget principles. Going to the all-fund summary, the revenues of $119.8 million, expenditure of $119.4 million. Citywide, the budget as proposed does have a use of fund balance of $7.2 million. On the expenditure side, citywide investment in one-time capital of $6.5 million and a citywide investment in maintenance capital of $8.5 million. There's a table of the other funds. I'm not going to go through them because Mr. Davidson just read the amounts for all the funds, but they're there to be in the record. To touch on the citywide one-time capital as proposed for 2016, transportation has a total of $3.75 million, $3.5 million for Sun Valley Phase 1 construction, and $250,000 for sidewalk connectivity. Community development has an $800,000 project for the East-West Alley Phase 1 Option 2. $500,000 of this, as proposed, is coming from the general fund. Police department has a total of $732,000 in one-time capital. $423,000 is to continue the TD May radio compliance units project. $222,000 to purchase and equip vehicles and radios for 4 new police officers. An additional $50,500 for a vehicle and radio for a new special investigations lieutenant. $19,385 for intelligence gathering and surveillance equipment, $10,000 to replace the squad room furniture, and $7,400 to to purchase and equip 6 additional bicycles for the Police Bicycle Patrol Program. For the fire department, the budget as proposed has $522,580 to replace all the self-contained breathing apparatus citywide. Also $9,000 for a security upgrade at Fire Station 1. Under the citywide one-time capital, there's, as proposed, emergency generators, $350,000, and $175,000 in additional design funding for the City Green project. In Recreation and Parks, $25,000 to continue the ADA compliance at City Facilities project, $40,000 to continue the outdoor security cameras project, and $75,000 to build a new restroom facility at Barrington Hall. And finally, in Environmental Public Works, $60,000 for a new 1-ton dump truck for the Stormwater Division. That's my quick overview through the budget. I do have a couple slides on the delete and add and change proposals. These first slides are going to...
Let's do this.
Yes, sir.
Let's get Councilmember Eichelhardt's motion.
Yes, sir.
And I think your delete and adds will cover that motion. To the extent they don't, we'll correct it. So I'd like to first entertain the Councilman Eichelhardt has put together a list of deletes and adds after talking with council. Then we'll get this presentation, which I think covers it. Then we're going to have a public hearing, and then we're going to hear from council. So, Kent, do we have a motion?
Thank you. Yes, sir, and I'd like for Mr. Costello to put that one page
Go right ahead.
on there. And the motion will be, of course, to approve the overall budget and all the elements of it. But then there are specific adds and deletes. And these are the things that we've talked about in our work session and I think have generally agreed to. You can go with the deleting the funding for emergency generators in the amount of $350,000. Then adds in the general fund are $100,000 for a connectivity grant program, which is for sidewalks and other things between communities that individual communities will help contribute towards. That's a kind of a match grant. $100,000 for a challenge grant towards a whirlpool at the ARC therapeutic pool. That is to be put into play when we have money contributed through the Ramblers. The funding of $50,000 for a study on parking and stormwater in the downtown area, which is through DDA. Funding of $25,000 for expanding the scope of the River Parks Master Plan, which is along the river down over to Cobb County. Additional $18,130 funding for the Roswell Arts Commission, which is a number of small things. Funding for $10,000 for year-round lighting on public property, which are to be determined where that will be in the future. General fund change proposals is within the things that were already within there that we're changing where they're coming from or how they're being used. One is to change the proposed $25,000 funding for Progress Partners and fund $12,500 with an additional $12,500 held in contingency for future issuance by mayor and council, with the intention being 6 months, see how they do and 6 months after that, based on their performance. Then increase the municipal elections new initiative by $32,613 because we have to have elections and the cost is higher than anticipated. One of the original things put forward, this would come out of our contingency. We have money left, so I'd like to go ahead and put that into the general fund, and the contingency amount will remain what was originally proposed. And then finally, out of a separate fund, the Hotel Motel Fund is an additional $35,000 towards Roswell Inc., towards their budget, an additional $31,829 funding for the CVB for their advertising and payroll-related items. And somewhere you've got showing that all that balances out, and actually does better than balancing out. We actually have money left over, which that will go into general fund balance. If anybody has questions or pieces of that, but that would be the motion to have those changes, adds and deletes.
Anything else you want to finish up to illustrate Councilman Eichelhardt's motion?
No, sir.
All right, this time we'll open it up for questions and comments from the floor. So if you'd like to speak, raise your hand. Come forward, please. We have a 5-minute time limit.
Janet Russell, 260 Willow Springs Drive. Thank you very much. Thank you to Kevin. I asked for some information, and I got it promptly, thoroughly, and professionally within about 4 hours. I'm very concerned about some of these things. I'm glad to see you're going to delete $175,000 for a city green design. We've already authorized $367,000. We don't need to be paying $600,000 for a design.
Just so you don't misunderstand it, that's
It's
an add. It's not a delete.
No, it showed as a delete, sir.
That ultimately did not make it, though.
No, it did not make it. So it's not being added. I apologize.
It's not being cut.
It's not being cut, so it's still included.
Well, then it needs to be deleted,
All right.
because it showed as a delete up there.
Well, just for the record.
Okay,
so
I'm glad you clarified that, and don't wait, use my minutes. Thank you for that clarification. $175,000 in addition to $367,000 means $600,000 for 5 months' worth of work. Excuse me, ridiculous. As I said before, I created a plan for you for free, and you won't look at it for free. I'm very concerned about some of these things you want. The DDA, since it started, you have funded them in 2 years, $284,925 to the DDA. I don't know what they've done for $284,000, except decide that the memorial needs to be moved and all those trees need to be cut down. Now you want to give them $50,000 more to do a stormwater study? I believe we have a really fine public works department, and that should fall under their jurisdiction. I pay a stormwater management fee just like you all do on your garbage and water bill every month. We don't need to be asking the DDA, who are not professionals in this field, to do anything with stormwater management. When I sat at one of their meetings, they were complaining that they didn't have enough money to do whatever they wanted, like build a better website and blah, blah, blah. That's what they want the money for. Excuse me, you know, it's like being the shill game in the New York streets. $50,000 for a stormwater study? Ask Public Works to do it. With regard to Roswell, Inc., I distinctly remember being at your work session that morning when Steve Stroud did a bells and whistles presentation about PPP, public-private partnership, and blah, 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 and you all jumped on the bandwagon and approved like $450,000 one morning and said, this is a great idea, and we're only going to do this once, and you have to be self-sustaining after this, and you're going to have to do reports. And it seems that in the 3 years they've been in existence, you've funded them $1,540,000. Yes, sir, in 3 years, $1,540,000 to Roswell, Inc. Part of that comes from the hotel-motel tax, I'm aware, but part of it doesn't. I asked what the salaries were of those people, and I was informed that Roswell, Inc. is not is a separate entity from the city, and therefore he didn't know the number of employees or the salaries. Well, if they're not a member, if they're not an entity of the city, why are we giving them $1,540,000? And why are we giving them $35,000 more this year, in addition to the $580,000 or whatever that you already allocated? $35,000 more. They're top heavy, and as far as most small business people in this town, remember, I'm the messenger. They aren't accomplishing anything for the small businessman. Now, you can scrunch your eyes and give me a look. I am the messenger. The CVB just did a report, and it shows that for every dollar spent, you get $110 back in revenue. Now, there's an investment in economics. 1 for 110. So why don't you take the other $35,000 that you're going to take out of the hotel-motel tax and give it to the CVB? Because the only thing we have in this town is hospitality and history. The only things we have. I think I didn't see anything mentioned about this $100,000 for a Roswell Arts Commission director, which is a 501c3, but we're going to hire somebody that's now doing volunteers doing the job. Wow, are we like New York City? And also $100,000 for a signature festival. Who came up with that idea? Who will decide what the festival is? Who gets to run it? Who will get hired to run it? And who will get to spend the money? These are always questions that get asked after the money's all gone. Nobody wants to answer those questions. I know you probably have friends and family that would love these jobs, and I know that when Roswell, Inc. came on board as the Roswell Business Alliance, there was no proper advertising of the job position at all. It was never publicized, maybe because it's not part of the city. But if it's not, then we need to stop paying them, and they need to be able to fly on their own.
Just for clarification, the $50,000 for the stormwater and parking study is being funded, but whether or not we spend it through Public Works or the DDA is yet to be decided. So that's still to be worked on, as I understand. This Convention and Visitors Bureau is being fully funded with their request. That was part of the ads, correct? So the council decided to fully fund them. The mayor, they're not as cheap as the mayor. They're being fully funded. And there was a request to add $100,000 for a signature festival, but that's not in the budget. So just some clarification. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? If he'll come to the microphone, if he needs some help, you can help him. If you'll come to the microphone, please. Now, he needs to come to the microphone. Does anyone else have any questions? No, if he doesn't want to come to the microphone, that's all right. The public hearing is closed. At this time, we'll hear questions or comments from council. Councilmember Orleans.
And this may be a question for Kay. There was discussion about the $800,000 for the east-west alley, and that being a partnership with a public-private partnership at a 50-50 level. Does that have to be stated anywhere here in this budget, or is that just something that will come up when we discuss it? I know we had quite a few conversations about it before we brought it up the last time, so I just want to clarify that.
It will have to be approved. Now, whether or not it's a 50-50 or what the participation of the people on the street, I don't think we're asking for $800,000 from the property owners. I know that one of the things I'm insisting upon is that we get easements for this property. So there are expectations, but it's in the budget, but it's not. But it will come back to this council to be approved for the final project.
Well, and I understand that. I just want to make sure that it's also clear to the property owners that not to expect us just to go out and start spending the money and doing everything that was in that plan on our own. So I think there should be some communication to property owners, and maybe Kay's got some comments on it.
Kay, please.
I can give you an update. The mayor's correct regarding it will come back to council. One of the decisions, as you're all aware, is you have given staff the green light to get the final written estimates for burying the utilities. So that will have to come back to you. So the entire scope of work hasn't been nailed down. This is a dollar amount to start that first phase. We do anticipate partnerships. Several property owners have been made aware of it. There have been no formal conversations. We're still working out where an easement might be, ownership, all of those details, so that we have something that's definitive to go to them with, but we will be back to mayor and council and committee first.
Okay.
So this is just establishing funding mechanism, but no dollars will be spent on that before.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to make sure that people are aware of it and they're not expecting us to just go out and start doing things totally on the city's own. So.
That's not the Roswell way. We don't just go out and spend it.
No, what I'm talking about is the Roswell way.
Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question on the pool, whirlpool. My understanding was that we were doing a $75,000 challenge grant, and the Ramblers were going to try to raise the money, the other $75,000. I thought that's how we left it. But here's another thing that I'm going to throw out there, so I'm going to just put it out there, Kent, for you. If we're going to do this, and I know the Ramblers will raise the monies, whatever they can raise, I know they're going to do that, would it be better just to go ahead and fund the $150,000 so we don't have to do a change order? We can go ahead and sign the contract, get the whirlpool going, and then whatever Roswell, the Ramblers can raise just can come back to our general fund, or our, I guess it's coming out, of our general fund. So that's just a question, because I don't think we can sign a contract, Ms. Love, unless we have the full monies. Am I correct?
Correct.
So if we only put in $100,000, and let's say the Ramblers have $35,000, we're still $15,000 short. So that's just my question. If we're going to do it, why don't we just fund the whole thing, and then the Ramblers knows what they have to do as a matching grant? That's my
I
suggestion.
would suggest this if that's the approach you take. If the approach you take is you're expecting $50,000 from the Ramblers, I would hope that you would go to the Ramblers to get them to pledge that they're going to raise that much, or at least get a commitment from them.
Well, I think
before you
I-
actually appropriate the money.
Mr. Mayor, I
Put
think.
it in the budget, but don't appropriate until you
Yeah.
get that pledge.
I think, Mr. Mayor, we had asked at the work session last time for Mr. Rogers. That sounds so cute, but you don't have the sweater on with the little patches. But anyway, I thought we had already asked our director to approach the Ramblers on this challenge grant. So if you don't mind, could I ask Mr. Rogers
Please come to the microphone.
about that, please?
Yes, after the last work session, I went back and spoke to the Ramblers at one of their board meetings, and they are certainly committed to whatever level the council decides. They are certainly think they're able and capable of raising the $75,000. That's kind of what they're expecting, is half of it to be raised and the city to generously appropriate the other 75. They just don't have that right now in their bank account. They have about $41,000 raised for the pool at this point in time. Some of that, though, has to be appropriated because they sold bricks and on the front paver, so it's not exactly the $42,000 that's available. I don't know. But they are committed to raising whatever the council suggests. They would love for the whirlpool to go in now during construction, though.
Well, I think we had a discussion, too, that it might have been after work session, that if we wait and just plumb it out, the price could go up on us. We're not for sure.
It certainly could.
It
We don't know that, but it certainly could.
But we do have a pledge. Would you consider
Yes.
that a pledge from the
absolutely.
Ramblers?
And it is in, it was a board meeting of the Ramblers, so it is in the record that they pledged and know that they have to raise at least $75,000
Well,
under this condition.
If we can save some money for us putting in the $150 with the pledge from the Ramblers to do the challenge of 75, I would rather go ahead and put all the full amount in, get the whirlpool in now, because we know that the cost is $150,000, instead of waiting for the Ramblers to try to match this, and the price could go up on us.
Is that a motion?
That is a suggestion to Mr. Councilmember Eichelhart. I am not going to amend his motion, but that is a suggestion.
Well, the funny thing is, we were at 75, and I changed it to 100 because you suggested that we change it to 100.
Well, I'm doing that, but it's still a challenge grant.
But
I think what she's suggesting is we raise it to 100
At this
with the
point, right, so-
75,000 to be.
that was the idea
expectation.
previously, because we didn't know that they were going to have that money on hand, and we wanted to do it now, and we're in the kind of in their tight timeline to do that. So as long as there is the understanding that it's actually the 75, then ultimately what we will spend will be the 75. But I think we do need to have that spending take place now, correct? So that we can make that in, because it could and will likely go up anytime you build something after the fact. You've already built the rest. It's likely to increase the cost.
So,
So for this, we can make it 150, but with the understanding that that is to fund it, but is expected that $75,000 was required. The $75,000 will be paid back by the Ramblers.
Councilmember Orleans.
I'm just going to confirm that with Mr. Rogers. That his neighborhood over there would come back to $75,000 as a commitment.
Absolutely.
Didn't
They,
want Mike on.
they have committed to that. This is the same group that raised $100,000 for the bus, one bank cell at a time. So they have
Their
understand the
credit is good
commitment they're
with
making.
us.
Right.
Their credit is good with us.
Yeah, that's all we're trying to get to, is if we go ahead and fully fund it now, that we're going to get, it's going to be a 50-50 partnership, kind of like the East Alley over there.
then Mr. Mayor, then I will make an amendment to the motion that.
But he's already amended
Oh,
it.
you already amended it?
So yes, we're going to make that 150 then for the challenge grant
Hey,
toward the
cool.
Whirlpool, with then language somewhere, if somebody writes this part down, that $75,000 will be
We got
paid
it.
by the Ramblers.
Any other questions or comments from council before I ask for a second? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to these changes, how does this impact our budget in terms of specifically, do our general fund revenues still exceed our general fund expenses and operating maintenance capital?
Yes, sir. This available $472,500, that is available in the capital projects fund balance. So any additional one-time capital, though it would be a general fund project, the additional funding for it would just come out of the capital projects fund balance where there is sufficient funding.
All right, so I'm not sure that answered my question.
Operating revenues exceed operating expenses and recurring maintenance capital, still.
Still, okay. So we actually, with the deletions and the additions we have made, we actually have an additional $166,803. Is that correct?
Yes, an additional $166,803. That is on the operating side,
revenue.
with revenues over the operating expenditures plus maintenance capital.
But we don't need to spend it tonight.
No.
I'm not looking to spend it, I'm just making sure we're covering it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Eichelhardt.
Before we vote, I actually was going to make that point, that we are not spending all the money that we have to. We're actually leaving some in here, which will...
Fiscally conservative, Councilmember Eichelhardt,
So
once again,
this is a good thing.
holds the line.
But the other thing that I wanted to point out, or to thank before we vote, is the staff who've done such a great job for such a long time. And obviously we have Kevin and Keith and Ryan. You know, Keith is ahead of things, but he doesn't do anything. So these folks do all the work. And the two that do the real work are Denise and Lynn, and they've always been here for longer than I have, and they do all the hard work. So thank you for that, and we'll pass this thanks to your hard work.
Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Wynn. Any further discussion? All in favor of giving Councilmember Diamond?
I hate to do something as large as the budget and not have any comments or anything on it, but quite frankly, every question I could come up with has been answered, and I appreciate the sustainability theme this year, and I just want to thank everybody as well. I think this has been an amazingly easy process, and thank you to Mr. Eichelhardt.
Any additional comments? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Councilmember Price is absent with an excuse tonight. And the next item, Mr. Davidson.
The next item is millage rate.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to adopt a millage rate. Now therefore, the mayor and council of the city of Roswell wish to establish a millage rate of 5.455. The millage rate has a component of 5.055 mills for the general fund, operating and capital improvements budget, and a component of 0.400 mills for servicing bonded indebtedness. The millage rate may require adjustment upon approval of a certified tax digest for the year 2015. We have approved. This will be the second reading.
Do we have a motion to approve?
Move to approve millage rate.
Motion by Councilmember Eichelhardt to approve. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Napolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions regarding the millage rate? Any questions? Seeing no hands up, public hearing's closed. Any further discussion by council? Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to let everybody know we are not raising the millage rate. The overall millage rate is staying the same for, the 10th year in a row. It's still 8 years. And I think we're probably the only place around that's not raising the millage rate. So I want everybody to know we are not raising the overall millage rate. And good job to Finance Keith and his gang again. Thank you very much.
All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. This time we'll call upon Administration and Finance Liaison, Councilmember Ken Eichelhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The next item is approval for the mayor and city administrator to sign a contract with Deal Flow Networks for the upgrade and replacement of the fiber network switches in the city's fiber ring in the amount of $188,000.
Thank you, Councilmember Eichelhardt. This is the budget amendment that we did a couple of months ago to get full funding for the fiber switches, our fiber ring that connects all of our different facilities together for the data and communications flow is aged considerably to the point to where reliability is taking quite a hit. So these will be replacing the old switches that we have to new switches with new technology that will also allow that data to flow in two directions, so that if there's a problem in the ring somewhere as it stands today, wherever that problem is forward is down until the problem is fixed. This will allow the buy flow, as it should with the new technology, to be able to have whatever fails, fail, but the rest of the ring stays active. So we're asking for this purchase. We've gotten the bids in, and the $188,000 will cover us to put this new technology in. It's 18 switches.
Does the council have any questions? Do we have a motion? Motion to approve by Councilmember Eichelhardt. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Wynn. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
The next item is approval of a resolution to amend multifamily water rates. Mr. Lee?
Thank you, Councilmember Earhart. Good evening, Mayor and Council. What I have before you tonight is a resolution to modify our water rates for multifamily developments that are serviced by a master meter. This is a process that Finance and Environmental Public Works went through in evaluating over the past couple of months. Just to give you the background, currently we have a system to charge our multifamily master meter developments with a base fee based on the meter size. I.e., or just as an example, for Roswell Riverwalk condos, they have a 2-inch meter. Their base fee is $50.76 a month. Additionally, we have a tiered structure that is variable for each development, and so their conservation or consumption rate changes based on a calculation of units and a consumption rate that differs by development. We are proposing to move our multifamily developments to a structure that mimics our single-family detached homes. The base rate would be $9.72 per unit. So for Roswell Riverwalk condos, it would be 144 units times $9.72. Their base fee on a monthly basis would be $1,399.68. Additionally, their consumption rate would be based on the 10,000 gallons per unit for the tiers for conservation use. Their current bill is around $6,958 a month. Under the new structure, it would be $5,788 per month. Overall, the city has 22 master meter multifamily developments. This particular change would increase revenues by less than $25,000 in the water fund. This particular proposal is to treat our multifamily developments in the same fashion as we do our detached families.
Does the council have any questions? Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. Mr. Lee, I know we have, well, actually, this is probably more a question for Mr. Skalsman. I know we have a system where we monitor usage, and when we see spikes in usage for single family, we pretty quickly alert the homeowners that there's been some sort of an issue. It's probably a little bit more challenging with multifamily because you have so many people on the same meter. There probably are spikes, but are we thinking about ways to monitor that? Or it may be a little outside of the scope of what we're talking about here tonight, but I was just thinking of it.
I can say we certainly are looking at that. We do not currently have that system in place for the larger master meter configurations. The technology is not quite there yet. I don't believe we have it on any larger than residential meters at the moment, but we're certainly looking at that.
I would think that if there was a large leak, if they had a pipe break, say in the parking lot or in a building, something like that, the usage would be high for a continual amount of time. I guess we can identify that, can't we? But if someone's toilet's running, we probably wouldn't find that. But a major leak, can we identify that?
Yes, we can, but it does take monitoring on our part as well as the owners.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve by Councilmember Eichelhardt. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wynn, Liaison to Community Development Department, is up next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is approval of the text amendment to the UDC for outdoor amenity space, and this will be the second reading of the text amendment.
Mr. Davidson.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend Article 2, Rules of Interpretation, Article 3, Residential Districts, Article 4, Corridor and Node Districts, Article 5, Downtown Historic Districts, Article 6, Employment Districts of the Unified Development Code, to provide changes to the definitions of landscape open space and outdoor amenity space and change the percentage requirements in each of the categories for the building type standard requirements and include administrative variance for landscape open space and outdoor amenity space. Now therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following amendment. Article 2, Rules of Interpretation, Section 2.2, and rules applicable to all districts, Section 2.2.6, Common Landscape Open Space, Section 2.2.7, Outdoor Amenity Space, and Section 13.9.2 are amended as follows, text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and the building type standard requirements that provide the lot parameters for the outdoor amenity space and landscape open space by percentage in the following section of the adopted Unified Development Code. Article 3, Residential Districts, Article 4, Corridor and Node Districts, Article 5, Downtown Historic Districts, and Article 6, Employment Districts are hereby amended to read as contained in Exhibit A, which is attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. And if approved, this will be the second reading.
Thank you, David, for reading that. The discussion that we have had at the last committee meeting, which was on May 12th, the Admin, Finance, and Recreation and Parks Committee, was a discussion around a portion of the ordinance that allowed for the zoning director to be authorized to approve an administrative variance for the landscape and open space, outdoor amenity space, may have a combined total of 20% below the minimum required percentage. That was the discussion at the committee, and that is how the ordinance is drafted that is in front of you this evening. Also included in your backup material is Exhibit A. We did provide all of the changes in each of the individual categories to land on the 20% requirements, where we changed 15 and 5%, as well as the other 10 and 10% in the individual categories as requested by the committee. So if you have any specific questions on the ordinance this evening, I'm here to answer.
Does the council have any questions for Mr. Townsend? Councilmember Eichelhardt.
I want to clarify one thing again on the application of what we're doing. And first, I totally agree with the idea of providing flexibility on our key pieces that are through Highway 9 and small little places that are 100% asphalt. I totally get that. It makes sense. My problem is when we expand that to other things across the board. So I want to clarify just one particular, because my key concern is our big properties like Riverwalk, as I asked you that question. Riverwalk being the potential project on the southeast quadrant of Holcomb Bridge and Georgia 400, which currently is zoned OCMS. And that provides for landscaping and open space of 35% is what the requirement is. But if it were to be rezoned to CX, which has not been done yet, but that is one of the proposals being looked at, all the building types within there have what's proposed now as little as 5% in outdoor amenity space and 15% of landscape open space. So at a best case scenario, in a lot of these most likely building types, we're looking at 20% as opposed to the 35% right there, which I think could be a huge difference in what we're doing. And then within the landscape open space, we're allowing that to be used within buffers and waters and other things like that, which could theoretically just essentially make that go away. And the outdoor amenity space can be on the roof. So that also then takes away from what's on the ground. So am I reading that correctly, that that could be the impact of that? Or is there, that's my concern, is that we're creating a major difference in what could be done now on a major piece of property.
Well, I think that the qualification that you're asking for is the OCMS as a zoning designation was really identified for 7-8 story office buildings with parking decks. in probably 4, maybe 5 locations within the city. So a 35% landscape open space for that piece of property was pretty easy to get with a 8-story building and a parking deck. The context of Riverwalk, identifying that as a CX, a commercial mixed-use designation, creates a compact village concept that was foreseen as part of the comprehensive plan. I think the numbers that we're landing on with the 15% landscaping and the 5% amenity space are going to provide the openness that you're looking for, but also the, I'm not sure that everyone's comfortable with this term, the urbanness that that development may have in it when we provide right next to 400 on the other side of Old Alabama, what type of development are we proposing to have there with CX?
Let me add to something to that as far as when there is a rezoning involved, and we're not talking about property which is currently zoned CX, but if there is a rezoning involved, and Riverwalk would be an example, my experience has been that this council takes a hard look at the site plan. And I think that site plan will be driven not as much by CX as by what this council looks on that site plan and the acceptability of it. So to say that I think that's going to have the minimum is going to be if it's zoned, for example, CX, that'd be the minimum, but what's actually required is going to be driven a large part by this council on rezoning.
But what is proposed is always the developer's going to take what we give them as a starting point. So I just think we are now allowing, instead of 65% coverage, we're now allowing 80% coverage. That's my point.
I think it would be a mistake for the developer, for any developer on a rezoning, to assume that this council is going to give them a lot. I think it's going to be a healthy discussion and a consideration of all issues. So that's just, I believe, that's when you get a rezoning. It's going to be a different animal than these currently zoned properties. Other comments, questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you. We have added a new definition here, common open space, but we don't have it defined within the UDC. We have open space defined, and it's defined as public or private use. So I would assume we're talking about the same definition as open space, but it would be.
Where do you find common open space?
On the chart. We have 3 categories: common open space, landscape open space, and outdoor amenity space.
The common open space was a category that's defined for the smaller lot subdivisions to meet the 20% requirement. That number's not being changed.
Well, I was looking for that definition. I couldn't find it. That's why I'm bringing it up. We have open space defined, but that's public and private.
It's in Chapter 11, page 11.3. I'll just put it up on the overhead so everyone can.
That'd be great. There it is.
That was drafted and placed in the UDC when dealing with the smaller lot size requirements of making sure that they provided in the subdivisions. The task related to the outdoor amenity space is really within the mixed use and commercial corridors and sections like that. This section is not, we're not changing any of this section.
Right. I understand. I just couldn't find the definition, and it would be helpful to have in the back under definitions if we could refer back.
I wish we would have done that, but when it was added at the last minute when adoption, it got put where we found it. So
next go round we'll take care of it.
I hope there's a couple go rounds.
And really all it is just referring to that section, so if somebody's looking for that definition, they can find it. I did have one comment on the text itself. We talked quite a bit about the administrative variance and to what percentage that should be, and I mentioned at our committee meeting, I think 10% in my mind is an administrative variance. Once we get up to 20%, that's more than administrative. So I still would like to see that brought down to 10%. I've heard from a number of people in the community that they'd like to see that at 10% as well. Somebody can always come in and ask for a variance, and that's something they always have the right to do. But I think once you get above 10%, you're really looking at something that's of a large enough magnitude that it constitutes a public hearing, in my mind.
Councilmember Diamond.
As I recall, part of the reason we did that was because we were taking those 20% and splitting them up. So 20% of a 10% was different than 20% of 20%. But the way you
Well, it says a combined total. It doesn't say 10 and 10.
Yeah, I think where we were headed was we brought everything back to 20 with the idea that we would give the 20% variance on the split. So maybe that's where we need to make the adjustment.
Councilmember Wynn.
Mr. Townsend, on the questions that you heard from Council Members Depolito and Diamond, I see that you did add may have a combined total of 20% below minimum required percentage. What would be your comfort level, or our comfort level really, of doing 20% and don't have and, but have or? Or do you need for both of the open space and the amenity space? See what I'm trying to get to? Mm-hmm. Is it you either do 20% of, I don't know how I'm trying to word this. I think or would solve the problems that we would be having. Would or solve?
So you're looking to change this and?
Well, yeah, because on E it says landscape open space and outdoor amenity space may have a combined total of, yes. What would that do to that and get rid of combined total? Say landscape open space or outdoor amenity space may.
That actually increases it.
May have, yeah. I don't know if that would work or not.
I think changing it to 10% solves the problem.
Okay, well, if we did 10% of combined total, so you're okay with the saying it may have a combined total of 10% below?
Yeah, I think that, in my mind, that's much more reasonable than 20%.
Because then, if it's at 20%, he would have 10% of the 20%. I mean, 20% of the 20%. And I think we still reach the same place that we're trying to get to.
So we're looking to change this
to 10, but keep and in there and combine total in there. And I'm just, that's just a suggestion. That's for discussion purposes right now.
Okay.
But if that's the comfort level of my colleagues, that's what I'd like to hear from them. Thank you.
Councilmember Orleans.
I thought we discussed this pretty thoroughly in the committee session, and we went back and forth, and came up with the 20% as a workable amount, and that it is a smaller amount than what originally you think when it's applied. So I don't see we need to make any changes to the wording at all. So.
Councilmember Eichelhardt.
I agree with the 10%, but I have two different things separate from that. When we first discussed the open landscape open space, excuse me, one of my questions was whether or not we should allow the neighborhood buffers and other things to be included in that. And you said it was already that way in the previous, and you were correct. You were going back and looking at that. But the other thing that we had in the original zoning code was that no more, and I'm reading directly from it, no more than 25% of any lot area in water or floodplain shall be credited as a minimum required landscaped open space without approval of the Roswell Design Review Board or Historic Preservation Commission, whichever has jurisdiction. So we actually, previously, we did allow the buffers, but if it was either a lake or a pond or whatever, water and/or a floodplain, then we only gave credit up to 25%. And so if we're going to change it or make it to where it's something that it used to be, I think we need to have all the elements that were part of that. So I would suggest that we add that letter C to the existing, where we've got B, landscape open space must be set permanently aside, to add C to be the exact same wording as it was previously, so that we accepted the one to make that the reason why to do it. But we did not carry forward the other safety part of that. So I would like to suggest we add that, and I have the thing in writing here if you need from the previous zoning code. That's one. And second, in the outdoor amenity space, we talked about having the rooftop or other upper level. And I've said this numerous times that my concern is that you could essentially put things up on top of the roof, and then that takes away from the overall goal of having less coverage on the ground. And if I were a developer, I would put everything on the roof. So I would like to propose that we make that, just as we have in the outdoor amenity space, that at least 50% of the required amenity space must be located in one contiguous open area, that at least 50% of the required amenity space must be located at grade, so that we do allow for that, but that we don't let it all be up on the roof. So those are two changes I would like to suggest, and ultimately make a motion for it if needed.
Councilmember DiPolito.
I guess one thought on the amenity space. One of the things that we've accomplished here that I think works pretty well is splitting out the outdoor amenity space, so you can't have 100% of your outdoor and landscape or open space up on the roof. You just can't do it anymore because in most cases we have at least 10, 15% of the land has to be landscape open space. That needs to be at grade. And I guess now that I've said that, we probably need to clarify that the landscape open space is at grade, and it wouldn't be. You wouldn't consider a planter landscape open space, would you?
No.
Okay. So I think, Councilman Aguilar, I think that actually accomplishes your concern there. Another thought, I thought a lot about this 25% and whether we should include the ponds and some of the other areas and limit that to 25%. But I think the mayor pointed out at a couple of our committee meetings that that's open space too, whether it's a pond or it's floodplain. It may not be developable, but it is open space, and the goal is to have green space and open space. So I think I'm actually okay with that.
But it's open space, but it doesn't mean you have to clarify it as what meets a requirement, because then you basically give that away as extra. So we're just going about this the wrong way.
I guess I wanted to reiterate, we bounced back and forth on whether that should be 10% or 20% or how we split that. And to me, 20% is just too significant to be administrative. So I'm comfortable at 10%. And I think we need to stick with the 10. Like I said, you can always go above 10% and come to council and have that as a public meeting. BZA. Or BZA, but it needs to be a public forum, in my mind, once you get that magnitude.
Do I have a motion?
Yes, sir. Motion to approve second reading, excuse me, with one change, and that will be to 13.9.2. Change the 20% to 10%, but leave the rest of the language in. So we will only change the percentage of the administrative variance. Other than that, everything else I will not change. That is the only change that I have, and that's my motion.
We have a motion by Councilmember Wynn to approve with the amendment to the 20% to drop to 10%. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. At this time, we'll hear from the public. Any comments from the floor? Questions or comments? Hearing no, public hearing is closed. Mr. Eichelhart, do you wish to make an amendment?
No, not at this point. I don't see any point. But I do have a comment that when we went to the UDC, we had a 40-acre plot that was up off of Old Roswell Road. And we took that from AG 43, which is the lowest level of green space, and made it into a CX, if I remember exactly, with the intention of hoping that would be an office space. And I said that was a major mistake, that we shouldn't do that in a rezoning on our own. Ultimately, it didn't work out, and it's now over 350 townhomes. So it's an unintended consequence, and I think we're going to see more of that based on we've passed this with unintended consequences that we clearly don't understand.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. That is Orleans, Wynn, Dippolito, and Diamond. All opposed. Councilmember Eichelhart passes 4-1, with Councilmember Price being absent with an excuse. Now we'll turn to liaison to the Environmental Public Works Department, Councilmember Rich Dippolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is approval of an amendment to the City of Roswell Code of Ordinances to repeal Article 24.6, Roswell Lakes and Ponds Partnership Policy, and replace it with Article 24.6, Roswell Dredging Assistance Policy. This is the second reading. Mr. Skowski.
Thank you. This is our second read, and the item includes a number of summary points of what has been changed, the key points that have changed in this revised ordinance. In your package, you have the clean version of the ordinance as proposed. The second version is a markup reflecting the changes that were made in committee discussions and following our first read on April 27th. I'd just like to highlight that one change from the April 27th read on page 110 of your package. We changed the language under item E1 to add the clause multiple dredging projects for specific lake or lakes will not be approved, and this is the change to add more frequently than every 10 years unless approved in advance by mayor and council. That's the only change in the prior language. There was one other change that was made at committee as well. In addition, the original ordinance that's being repealed and replaced is also included in your package for reference. If you'd like, I'll go through the highlights of the changes.
If you'd go through it quickly.
Very quickly. The first point is to really focus the goals of the program a little more clearly on the dredging aspect of existing lakes and ponds and providing for the sharing of a portion of the cost of sediment removal. The second is limiting those costs to 50% of the actual approved cost of the project. The third key point is that projects must be approved prior to commencement of any work, and that the maximum reimbursement for any single project will not exceed $500,000. The fourth is that all applicants and projects must meet all eligibility criteria and all city requirements, principally involving obtaining approved dredging project plans and complying with all permitting requirements from the city. And finally, that project applications may be funded as funds are budgeted by mayor and council through the normal budgeting process. I think those are the highlights.
Does the council have any questions? Councilmember Orleans.
Sure. Are you sure?
I am sure, Councilmember Orleans.
A couple of things we discussed and I brought up at committee meeting, and you're confident that those are all being taken care of in this ordinance, bringing over from the old one to the new one, that we don't need specific things on city access and so forth that we talked about?
I believe those are all covered in the current language. I defer to Mr. Davidson just for confirmation on that point.
Yes, they're still included in here if we need them.
That's what?
It's still included in here for the easements and such.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Davidson, would you read the ordinance?
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend Chapter 24, Utilities and Services, Article 24.6, Adoption of the Roswell Lakes and Ponds Partnership Policy of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell. Now therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following amendment. Chapter 24, Administration, Article 24.6, Adoption of the Roswell Lakes and Ponds Partnership Policy of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell, Georgia, is hereby amended by deleting therefrom Article 24.6, Adoption of the Roswell Lakes and Ponds Partnership Policy in its entirety, and substituting a new Article 24.6, Roswell Dredging Assistance Policy, therefore to read as follows, text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this will be the second reading.
Do we have a motion? Motion by Councilmember Dippolito for approval. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Orleans. Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
This time we'll call upon Councilmember Jerry Orleans, liaison to the Public Safety Department.
Item on the agenda tonight for us is approval of the mayor and our city administrator to sign a memorandum of agreement with Lumpkin County for inmate housing. And here to present is Chief Grant.
Thank you and good evening. As you all know, the city of Pelham for a little over 2.5 years has provided a jail service for the city of Roswell for those prisoners who have been in our custody for over 72 hours and have not made bond. The contract that we have with Pelham is for $30 per day. It has a 30-day termination clause. Toward the end of April, we were notified by Pelham that at the end of May they were going to terminate the contract and would no longer provide that service to the city of Roswell. Prior to that notification, I had received word that Pickens County was interested in housing our inmates, our prisoners. So I had reached out to the sheriff in Pickens County to see if he was truly interested and met with him, and he said that he was interested in housing our prisoners. So before we ever received notice from Pelham, we were already had other alternatives. Roswell, Sandy Springs, and Johns Creek, which are in a similar situation with us, they also use Pelham for their jail service provider, went up to Pickens County, looked at the facility. The sheriff never had provided that type service to an outside agency before, so he was unable to quote us a price on how much it would be per day. The following day, which was the day that we're actually, the following day I was notified by Lumpkin County or contacted by them and asked if they could also bid on the process of providing that service. So again, the cities of Johns Creek, Sandy Springs, and Roswell went up to Lumpkin County and toured their facility, and both facilities are very good facilities. The sheriff of Lumpkin County was immediately able to quote a price of $35 a day because they're currently housing the inmates of Forsyth County while Forsyth County builds a new jail, and they're about to open their new jail. So he immediately quoted us that price. Pickens County additionally has a state certification at their jail, and they're in the process of obtaining an accreditation through the Medical Association of Georgia for their jail. Johns Creek has also been notified by them that they're going to choose Lumpkin County for their jail provider. Sandy Springs has chosen Pickens County as their provider, not mainly because of the number of inmates that they have and the number of inmates that we have. It's difficult to transport that many from one jail. Prior to notifying us that Pelham was no longer going to provide this service to us effective June 1, they had informed us that their price for our next fiscal year was going to increase from $30 to $36 per day. So we knew as of July 1 our price was going to go up to $36. So now the price is going to be $35 per day, which is obviously a dollar a day cheaper per inmate, and we had budgeted for $36 in FY16. So we have the funds to cover that increase because we thought it was going to be a greater increase than it actually is.
Councilmember Orleans.
Chief, the one thing I was reading in that was for any major medical issues that they transport them, and then am I understanding correctly that we have to have an officer go from here up there to take them over at the hospital and stay there with them and watch them as our inmate at that point in time?
That is correct. The inmates are always in our custody, even when they're up there in Lumpkin County. So the reality is if we have an inmate that's in our custody and they need medical care, we would have to see what offense they're in for, what their medical situation is, and then get with the judge to decide, does this person need to remain in custody, or do we need to make other decisions? But yes,
How was that dealt with in Pelham County? We didn't go down there for a hospital stay for them, did we?
No, but we did, essentially the same thing would have happened. We never had a situation where somebody was taken to the hospital that I'm aware of there.
No, I understand that it's our liability, but I'm talking about physically transporting one of our officers now. We did not have to do that before, so that is a change in the contract.
That is. I'm glad you brought that up, because another advantage to Lumpkin County is the difference in the distance from Roswell. Pelham, if you've never been there, is 4.5 hours away one way, where Lumpkin County is actually Dahlonega, which, depending on traffic, is about an hour away. So we're much closer.
My question is, but I don't think that was in the contract before. We didn't have to have an officer transported down to Pelham if we had an inmate go to the local hospital, did we?
I'd have to review that contract to see. I'm really not sure, to be honest with you.
My curiosity is getting to, if we didn't have to do it before, why do we have to do it now that they wouldn't? I mean, I know we're responsible for the medical costs, but as far as just an officer on duty.
Well, if one of our prisoners is in the hospital, some officer is going to have to sit with them. And Lumpkin County is saying that for $35 a day, they're not going to sit with our prisoner, that we have to come do it. We have to sit with that prisoner if that prisoner is going to remain in custody. And what I'm saying is the solution wouldn't be optimally to have an officer, either ours or a deputy from Lumpkin County, do that. It would be to evaluate the crime that the person is charged with, and then evaluate the seriousness of the medical condition and see if it makes sense to keep the person incarcerated and be charged thousands of dollars.
Surgery, we could parole the gentleman. I believe in parole in extreme cases.
It may be difficult to get it done that quickly if it's that major.
Oh, Brian Hansford can get it done pronto.
That typically even happens here at our jail. Within the first 72 hours, someone may go to North Fulton Hospital, and we have to sit with them. Or we take somebody to Alpharetta, and they don't accept them, and we have to take them to North Fulton, and we have to sit with them. It's easier if it's an ordinance violation, because we can work with our judge and actually write a citation and leave them and not have to maintain them in our custody and control.
But I think that's different, so thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Chief. Along those lines, I noticed that under transportation, they actually, with the exception of that particular case, they transport prisoners to and from Roswell, so we don't even have to go. That
is correct. They will, 3 days a week, just like Pelham did, they will drive to Roswell, pick up our prisoners, and take them back to Dahlonega in Lumpkin County, and then and they will begin that June 1. After that, they will bring, as needed, bring prisoners from Dahlonega back to Roswell, and then Roswell back to Dahlonega 3 days a week.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion? Motion for approval by Councilmember Orlins. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Does anyone in the audience have any questions? Come forward, please. Give us your name and address.
About the meeting tonight. Janet Russell, 260 Willow Springs Drive. Chief Grant, why are we not using our jail? I seem to recall that when our friend the Chicken Man had his probation revoked, he spent 30 days in our jail. Why are we limiting it to 72 hours and outsourcing our inmates when we have a jail over there that we just put a new roof on for I don't know how many $100,000?
The roof was for the entire building.
I understand, but it's called the detention center.
This council, it was a decision of this council to outsource jail to Pelham and now to this other location because it cost us approximately $60 per prisoner to keep them here. So we're cutting costs by shipping them now to Lumpkin.
What about the inconvenience of the person who is a family member of one of these inmates, and they perhaps don't drive, and even an hour to Dahlonega, since there's no public transportation, they can't get there. So then you've cut them off from their family or community, assuming they lived in Roswell. I'm not saying being an inmate is the greatest thing on earth, but we've all known that one of the reasons there's a high recidivism rate is because people become detached from the communities within which they live or the family support system. So I'm just curious, $60 versus $30, but then when you add in an officer to go sit at the hospital in Lumpkin County or wherever the heck it is, I didn't even know where it was. I'm just curious, because what are we doing with the empty jail then? If we're only keeping people 72 hours, and I don't know how many inmates we have in this city daily, what are we doing with an empty jail? Maybe we need to make it into live, work, play. Everybody else seems to think that's a good idea. I'm just flabbergasted that 72 hours is the maximum.
It is not the maximum, it's the practice. As far as the use of the jail, we're currently studying long-term what we're going to be using that building for and how we're going to be handling our prisoners on a long-term basis. But no, the chief thinks it'll be like July now before he's ready to come back and present this council with his recommendations.
And can anybody be kept there for longer than that at the judge's discretion or your discretion, or is it mandatory after 72 hours that they go to wherever we've decided to outsource them?
It is not by statute, but it's by practice.
So who makes the decision? The judge or the chief or a police officer
the judge,
or who?
Sentences them to a term. Our police officers decide when they're transferred, but it is their practice if they're going to be held longer than 72 hours to transfer them. If they expect to be held less than 72 hours, not to transfer them. But some people may be transferred the first or second day.
Sure. Well, I have to really wonder what kind of care and service a person is getting for $35 a day, because that's 5 Happy Meals. I'm not saying we need to give them the Hilton, you know that. However, I just have to question $35 versus $36 versus $30 a day. That isn't even a pizza at Fix Pizza, $30 a day. So we've taken people that have problems. We don't want to deal with them once we've decided what they did wrong. So we ship them off to someplace else where then they have no connection with family or church or support, or whatever they need to get rehabilitated. I just kind of question it. Are we shooting ourselves in the foot? Saving $2 to do what? The recidivism rate is so high when you detach people from their communities.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. We have a report from our city attorney.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a recommendation for closure to discuss personnel litigation and real estate.
Is there a motion for closure? Motion by Councilmember DePolito. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Diamond. All in favor, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. We're adjourned. I'm going to get out here by 9 as predicted. I may not be out here quite by 9, but 9 was my prediction. We're going to be close. We lost our reporter. James. Wasn't it James? James was kind of like sort of getting in the groove.
He lost it and he's doing something else, or he's not here.
And he's left the company. This is the. I wonder if you came from Henry Wakefield Douglas. James, I never met James. He kind of was he's quiet.
Sit like that for anybody can sit like that for hours.
This man never moves.
Don't you have a little stand?